Welcome back, everyone. Next, we have Akari Therapeutics, trades on the NASDAQ under the symbol AKTX. It's a biotechnology company developing advanced therapies for autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. Please welcome its CEO, Rachelle Jacques. Nice to see you, Rachelle.
Thanks, Anna. Welcome, everybody. As Anna said, I'm Rachelle Jacques, CEO of Akari Therapeutics. Really happy to be here with you today. So today I will be making some forward-looking statements. Please be advised. At Akari, we are a late-stage biotech company where we were formed in 2015, focused on our lead asset, Macapan, which is a novel inhibitor of both complement C5 and leukotriene B4. So this is really to target pro-inflammatory pathways, and we believe will have application in a variety of autoimmune and inflammatory diseases. So broad potential here as we're looking at various applications. It's also important in biologics to have flexibility in the way that you treat patients with the different routes of administration. Very pleased with Macapan's flexibility there. We have robust clinical data sets supporting our work, and we are hyper-focused on two programs. The first is an HSCT TMA phase 3 program, pediatrics and adults. We have two different studies. And here, I'll tell you more about what HSCT TMA is in a few moments, but I think the really important part to note is that this is a rare condition where we have about 80% mortality in the population that we're studying. There are no approved therapies, and one of the really important aspects of this program from our perspective in terms of incentives from regulators, we do have rare pediatric disease designation from the FDA. This is quite important because if we're successful with the pediatric HSCT TMA program for Macapan, what that means is we have access to a priority review voucher. We could choose to use that voucher or to monetize it, and those have been selling over the last several years for about $100 million a piece. So an important part of our business story, as well as, of course, having that designation does help us to interact with the regulators and have some additional benefits. Our second program is in Geographic Atrophy. This is a different program in that it is blindness, and geographic atrophy can lead to blindness, and so very serious consequences of this disease. This is a preclinical program, and in fact, we're using our long-acting version of Macapan for this program because we believe it will potentially provide some very important benefits for patients in this disease area. In particular, a longer dosing interval. It's very important. We're talking about injections into the eye. So the fewer doses, obviously better for patients. So looking forward to telling you more about both of these programs in a few moments. In biotech, it's all about the science, but the science doesn't happen on its own. And the second most important thing is to have the right team. And a team that is experienced, that has breadth and depth of experience in drug development, in the biotech space, in understanding how to drive rare disease programs. All of this is really important when we think about the probability of success. And so I'm very pleased to say I came to Akari about a year and a half ago. I've been able to pull together what I think is a stellar team. You can see a lot of symbols on this page. The most important thing here is that we've got a group of folks who have vast experience in drug development. We all join Miles Nunn, who is our Chief Scientific Officer, and importantly, the discoverer of Macapan. So we can say we have the world experts in Macapan, and very pleased to be working with this team to bring Macapan to patients. Now, from my background, I am particularly excited about the complement inhibition aspect of Macapan. I did spend time as the head of the complement franchise at Alexion where complement inhibition was pioneered. And I know that there's a lot of possibility for complement inhibition. So very pleased to be able to bring additional benefits of complement inhibition to patients in the future. You can see here that there has been a lot of investment and excitement in the complement space. Companies who are in this space are garnering significant investment and valuations. Here we have a handful of companies that either are standalone companies, and you can see the market cap in the billions, or have been acquired, and again, for multiple billions of dollars. And the reason is there's not one size fits all. This is a class of product that has broad potential, and there is a lot of opportunity here to get the right investments and the right products to the right patients. And so we are pleased to be contributing to this space. Now, Macapan is a bit different from some of the other complement inhibitors that have been explored, and that is it's a very interesting science. In fact, it's derived from the saliva of ticks. And so it has a dual mechanism of action. As I mentioned, it's a complement C5 inhibitor, but also a leukotriene B4 inhibitor. And this actually evolved in the saliva of ticks. Miles Nunn is responsible for discovering this. And what led to that discovery is really the question of, when a tick feeds on its host, why is there no immune response? And the answer to the question is in these proteins, where essentially the protein in the saliva is shutting off the immune response of the host. And so we know that's evolved over perhaps millions of years. We are leveraging that and using that to fight diseases of autoimmune and inflammatory conditions. So really thinking about not only addressing from one pathway, but from two different pathways, which actually can have some synergistic effects. Our programs include the two phase 3 programs, adult and pediatric, and HSCT TMA, and of course, the preclinical program in geographic atrophy for pasylated Macapan. So you might be asking, what is HSCT TMA? It's not something you hear about every day, but as many rare diseases and rare conditions, unfortunately, there is a really serious unmet need here. We're talking about hematopoietic stem cell transplant related thrombotic microangiopathy. So that's why we call it HSCT TMA for short. You can think of it as take a child who has had a bone marrow transplant, for example. Maybe it's to treat an underlying malignancy or a primary immunodeficiency. And in this case, unfortunately, sometimes complement activation is leading to inflammation and these small blood clots that can infiltrate the organs. Unfortunately, this can lead to multi-organ dysfunction and multi-organ failure and death. So in the population we're studying, which is the severe population, it's about 80% mortality, and there are no approved treatments here. Very, very serious condition. We're hopeful about Macapan's application here for a variety of reasons. One is complement C5 inhibition has been shown in various studies to be effective in this patient population. And so we are building on that knowledge base, and we are adding some additional, I think, important factors where Macapan is truly differentiated and very well suited for patients with HSCT TMA. One is a simple fixed dosing. It's very important for both the physician treating the patient, as well as a patient may be able to go home and be treated at home. And so a simple fixed dosing allows that. Second, we have a rapid offset and onset of action, which I'll tell you more about and show you a bit about in a moment. This, again, is really important. You have a rapidly evolving, very serious case quite often, and the ability to rapidly control, complement activation is very important. But also when patients are no longer in need of the therapy, this allows a rapid offset. Again, important to clinicians who want that control. And lastly, we believe that the LTB and LTB4 inhibition may be beneficial in patients who are also suffering from a graft versus host disease, which is quite common following HSCT. So I mentioned a bit about the rapid onset and offset, and this chart here on the right comes from a case study that's been presented at a couple of different conferences now. Very interesting in that this is CH50, and CH50 is essentially showing the complement activation. And you can see that the patient starts very high here at the beginning. Once they start being dosed with Macapan, this is in our first part of our clinical study in our phase 3 for pediatrics. Once they start being dosed, you can see within about a day and a half, already CH50 is well under control. And you can see that progressing along for a number of weeks. And then this patient, in fact, had an adverse reaction to something, an adverse effect. And the clinician who was doing the study, these are very complicated patients on many medications. The first thing that you do is you remove the investigational drug and to see, is that what's causing it? They did that, and you can see that over to the right when the Macapan was removed. You can see that complement escalated very quickly again. That's the rapid offset. And then the doctor evaluating this saw that it was not, the reaction that the patient was having was something completely different and was not related to the Macapan. So he quickly put the child back on the Macapan, and you can see again here at the very end of the chart, the rapid onset again and active Macapan on board. So really interesting case study. We're very happy to say this is a 6-year-old boy who was able to go home and against all odds. So we are looking, of course, to have improved outcomes for these children and eventually for the adults as well. This is incredibly important as they face this high mortality. Now, we obviously at Akari see this high unmet need. The regulators as well see this high unmet need. And you can see that we have been able to secure orphan drug designation from the European Commission. We've also received fast track designation, orphan drug designation, and rare pediatric disease designation from the FDA. So what these designations allow us to do is have access to the regulators on a more frequent basis. We are able to expedite certain aspects of the program, and we are able to waive certain fees and costs and so on related to our program overall. So this is important from several perspectives, but I will say the most important from an incentive standpoint is really related to that rare pediatric disease designation that I mentioned earlier, where we do have the opportunity to earn a priority review voucher with the approval of Macapan in pediatric HSCT TMA. Now, this is important because for some companies, you may want to use the voucher for a future program. And other companies, you may want to sell the voucher because perhaps you don't have a need for it. Akari, we're looking at commercializing rare disease programs on our own. And for rare disease programs, quite often, you don't need a priority review voucher for priority review because you will have already earned one through your rare disease program. And so for a company like Akari, having this opportunity to potentially monetize the PRV, as we call it, is really important. And you think about approximately $100 million potentially of non-dilutive financing to supplement our pipeline investments as we think about bringing the Macapan forward for several indications. So that kind of investment into our pipeline, we believe, will be very important. Of course, following an a successful study and a successful approval comes a launch. And when you look at rare disease, of course, we're talking about small patient populations, but very high unmet need. If you look at HSCT across several regions and the number of severe TMA cases coming from those stem cell transplants, in the US, we see about 3,700 per year. This is adult plus pediatric. And then across these large regions, US, Europe, UK, China, and Japan, we look at somewhere from 13 to 14,000 per year. So from a rare disease perspective, I think a very interesting population and again, significant unmet need. Moving to our second prioritized program is our Geographic Atrophy program. And this is a very interesting disease as well. Again, high unmet need, a little bit different here. So Geographic Atrophy is where you have the chronic progressive degeneration of the macula. And so this is happening in the late stages of dry age related macular degeneration. So dry AMD, as we say. And this can lead to, the geographic atrophy can lead to irreversible vision loss. So blindness, and it's affecting potentially 5 million people around the world, about 1 million estimated in the US. Now, it has been a great year for patients with geographic atrophy in that there have been 2 approved therapies in 2023, the first ever. And so this is an area where there is a lot of promise. And we're excited about this progress as well. However, there is significant unmet need that remains, and it's often the case when there's a first therapy for a disease, there's a step forward, but still significant gaps in needs from a patient and a treater perspective. Earlier this year, we hosted a KOL event with Dr. Elias Rachelle, and he really talked about the importance of the progress in geographic atrophy and the promise of complement inhibition through an intravitreal injection. And in fact, the first 2 approved therapies, the first 2 therapies that have ever proven that they can slow the progress of geographic atrophy are both complement inhibitors delivered intravitreally. And this is exactly what we're looking to do with our pasylated or long-acting Macapan. Now, Dr. Rachelle pointed out that there's also some significant shortcomings, and really importantly, the dosing interval is challenging. So of the 2 approved therapies, dosing is quite frequent, even up to every 25 days. And again, we're talking about a needle into the eye. So this is a challenging situation, and keeping patients coming in for such an injection is definitely a challenge, and we've seen that in other spaces like wet AMD, where intravitreal injection is also the method of treatment. So being able to address this dosing interval challenge with a longer dosing interval, and at the same time preventing the safety issue that's been seen in the first two approved therapies around, in particular, additional instances of choroidal neovascularization, which is quite serious and also vision threatening. These 2 aspects are really important for us to address. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do here with pasylated Macapan. We have building on the promise of complement inhibition with intravitreal injection. We believe that pasylated Macapan, of course, as a C5 inhibitor, fits that well, but also with a leukotriene B4 inhibition, we believe that this is going to have a potential impact on the instance of the safety issue that has been seen in the other 2 approved therapies, particularly in the CMV instance of once patients have been treated for GA, they're seeing a higher incidence of CNV. And what we know is that LTB4 can drive overproduction of VEGF-A, which then can lead to CNV. So we believe that by inhibiting LTB4, we actually may be able to prevent this over indexing in CNV and remove that safety issue. That's very important because I talked about the dosing interval, and the CNV issue really adds to the dosing interval challenge. So with a high dosing interval or a very frequent dosing in the current therapies, and then patients experiencing CNV, they're actually getting the CNV also treated with another intravitreal injection. And so what you have is the frequent dosing for GA, and on top of that now a frequent dosing for addressing the side effect. So this is, I think, quite cumbersome. And if you look at it through a patient lens, I think perhaps not feasible. So when we think about fewer injections into the eye, this is incredibly important. We're looking at a dosing interval of every 3 months or longer, eliminate the CNV issue. And so perhaps doses of about 4 doses per year with Pasley and Macapan versus what can be up over 20 doses per year with the existing therapies if patients are also experiencing CNV. So very important. So next steps, as we progress these 2 programs, we are, again, hyper-focused on moving these forward with a sense of urgency. We know that there's significant unmet need from a patient perspective, and for our HSCT TMA program in pediatrics, we anticipate starting our enrollment for that final study in 2023 yet, and then opening an adult study in 2024. And for our geographic atrophy program, we are on track to file our IND in the first half of next year, so the first half of 24. And once the IND is cleared by the FDA, we would be able to move into, of course, the first clinical studies. So an exciting 12 months ahead of us, and really pleased about the prospects of Macapan and Pasley and Macapan to be able to really impact patients here in these areas. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for your time, and I'll open it up for questions. Anna?
Great job, Rachelle. Yes, we do have some questions. First of all, you indicated that HSCT TMA is a rare condition. So what's the commercial potential for that?
Yeah, great question. So in rare diseases, you're right. There are small patient populations compared to mass diseases. But a couple of things are really important. Number one, we think about for this patient population, these patients are treated at centers of excellence. And so quite often in rare disease, when you're looking for patients, you're really searching for patients. And there's quite an effort to find patients and diagnose them. In this case, they're treated by an expert team at a center of excellence. So when you think about the model and the commercial model for finding patients and treating patients, it's much simpler and streamlined. And so it's a very cost-effective approach from a commercial model. And then, of course, with thousands of patients suffering from HSCT TMA, we believe that that is a very nice commercial opportunity for a rare disease therapy. On top of that, I would say the priority review voucher really adds to the business case and the potential for $100 million. There are very few product launches where you're going to see the opportunity to drop $100 million to the bottom line on, in the first days. And so that really for us is something that is additive to the business case for this particular program.
And tell us a little bit more about that, the priority review voucher. Can you monetize it now?
Great question. We've been asked that question several times, and it's interesting. So it is the voucher is in our hands if and when we receive an FDA approval for our pediatric program. And so there have been different parties who have tried over the years kind of looking for a place to monetize that early. What we see is that you really let go of too much value to monetize that early. And so really holding on to that until the time that it's in your hands is the best strategy for shareholders.
Makes sense. And with these two therapies approved this year for GA already, is there room in the market for Akari's asset?
It's yes. So again, great question, and really important progress again in the geographic atrophy space. I think the way that we look at it is if you look at wet AMD, which is treated through a VEGF inhibitor, kind of a similar model, so intravitreal injection. Those VEGF inhibitors have been around for more than a decade. And what you see in that space, and it's a great analog, is you see companies continuing, and those companies who already have products on the market continue to invest to try to increase their dosing interval because they know how important it is to patients. In fact, what happens, and there's study after study that shows, what happens with these patients is they just stop coming for the treatment. And so when we look at the potential here, we know that it's important from a patient perspective, and it's not just about convenience. It may very well be that many patients just don't get treated because of the dosing interval. So again, we use the wet AMD as an analog, and there's a lot of clear evidence. There's plenty of space for a third party to come in, actually anybody, at any time in the future, if you can really bring this important benefit of the increased dosing interval.
Perfect. Another question about the GA program. Why hasn't Akari partnered with it yet?
That is definitely something that we will look at doing in the future. So from a partnering perspective, the way that we think about it is if it's better in our hands at the moment, we should keep it in our hands to drive the value. And where the GA program is, Pasley and Macapan, the focus is right now developing Pasley and Macapan for that to move into the clinical studies. That really is best in our hands. We have that expertise. Now, we're opportunistic about partnering, but where we really see a partner coming into play is when they can add more value to the program than we can. And we think that really happens probably around phase 2. Somebody who has that broad reach, being able to do broader clinical studies and add the additional expertise as you think about how to position and go to market.
You've also said that there is broad potential, and talk a little bit how you see that. What's your vision? What are your next steps after the HSCT, TMA, and the GA?
This is a very interesting thing. So my background, I've been working in rare diseases for more than a decade, and quite often you're developing a therapy for one indication, and it's a lot of investment to bring a biologic to bear for patients. And you're quite often searching for what else could we do with this? How else can we leverage this investment? What other indications might there be? What other diseases might benefit? With Macapan and Akari, we have the opposite problem. And I've never really seen it to this extent, where the possibilities are very broad. And so it's a matter of narrowing and being very disciplined about the focus. So I think some obvious places to go would be areas where we would already be de-risked if we have an approval in HSCT TMA. So there are TMAs in other areas, solid organ transplant. You see it now with the evolution of cell and gene therapies. We're seeing a lot of TMA following cell and gene therapy treatments. And so when we think about how to kind of build on a program in a de-risked way, we think about those as next potential opportunities.
Now, Harry Schmidt says the key to survival in biotech is not only about great research and science, but about your ability to stay funded. And with interest rates as they are, that might be hindering great science. So can you discuss your ability to stay sufficiently capitalized?
It's a great question. And I think everybody knows that biotech right now is challenged in that regard. We're very pleased to be supported through a number of repeat investors and folks who really believe in the science and really believe in the team. And we will continue to pursue both dilutive and non-dilutive sources of funding in order to move Macapan forward.
And Rosemary Blake asks, do you have any joint ventures that could ultimately lead to an acquisition of your company?
We do not currently have any joint ventures in biotech. As you know, quite often pharma companies, biopharma, larger biopharma, are looking to biotech for their pipeline, for their research pipeline. And the way that that comes to fruition can be through licensing, through co-development, and through joint ventures and so on. And so, all of those things are possibilities for the future. But at this point, we're not in a current joint venture.
Beth asks, what do the designations do to your timeline in the trials? And will this have any effect on conserving any burn capital?
Definitely with the designations, especially around the rare disease designations, fast track, orphan drug, rare pediatric disease. One of the really important aspects, besides there's some monetary aspects, but from a drug development and regulatory standpoint, is that you have the opportunity to interact with the regulators more often. And that interaction is priceless. So that allows us to meet with regulators, ask them questions, get their insights, and really be more aligned as we march through the development. So yes, we see that as really valuable and beneficial to finding the fastest path forward for these programs, which is, this is the name of the game in rare diseases. You have to always be looking for how to move faster. And these interactions with regulators really help us to do that.
And quickly, a question about Macapan from Rita Patrick. What's the time frame from onset to offset of Macapan in your chart?
Well, that is, so in the chart that was presented on the initial control of CH50, which you could see there, is about a day and a half. And so some of those were 12-hour intervals. So you can see it's very rapid. We're measuring every half day. So again, I think in the world of complement inhibition, this is an incredibly attractive profile.
And last question from Arthur Salazar. What side effects have you seen with Macapan?
The safety profile of Macapan is very clean, not even site reactions. We have had Macapan in PNH patients, for example, and for multiple years, and have seen a very clean safety profile. We don't know if that's because it evolved over millions of years in these ticks, or there's some other aspect. But so far, we've been really pleased with the safety profile.
Well, fascinating technology that you have here. Thank you so much for joining us. Great presentation, and please come back with some updates.
Absolutely will. Thank you so much, Anna. Take care.
All right. Have a great day. Okay, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back.